The most expensive thing a person can own today is not a private jet or a mansion. It is visible, undeniable time. Not the time purchased from others, but the subjective psychological state of moving through the world without urgency, without obligation, and without the primal need to immediately respond. This is the ultimate status signal, and it operates entirely in the subconscious, dictating hierarchy far more effectively than any logo or title ever could. We fundamentally misunderstand status because we look for acquisition, the accumulation of assets, objects, or attention, when in reality, the pinnacle of human hierarchy is defined by what you can afford to reject. The obsession with display, the desperate need for others to acknowledge your wealth or power, is itself a low-status behavior. It is the frantic signal of the newly elevated, the insecure, or the person whose status is conditional and external. True, entrenched high position requires no explanation. It is a quiet, self-contained gravitational field. It is the ability to walk into a room wearing unbranded, slightly rumpled clothing that costs more than a car, but which broadcasts a singular, chilling message. I am not trying to impress you. This is the status of subtraction, and it is weaponized effortlessness. The signal of subtraction manifests in specific, measurable behavioral gaps. Consider response time. Low-status individuals are enslaved to the notification bell. Their phones are proximity bombs, demanding immediate attention, forcing a rapid, often frantic reply. High-status individuals, conversely, treat digital communication as a slow, asynchronous mechanism. They reply when it is convenient, or often, not at all. Their silence is not an oversight. It is a deliberate flexing of dominance. They control the pace of the exchange, forcing the supplicant to wait, to wonder, and to internally elevate the eventual response simply because of the scarcity imposed. If you are tired of the shallow answers that dominate public discourse, tired of motivational platitudes that never explain the cold, hard mechanics of social power, then you must subscribe now. Don't miss the next dissection of these invisible forces. The power of scarcity is absolute. When you see a person exhibiting perfect calm amidst chaos, moving deliberately while everyone else scrambles, you are witnessing the direct application of high status. They are demonstrating that their energy and attention are the most precious commodities they possess, and they will not expend them frivolously, especially not on performing their identity for others. This concept, known historically as sprezzatura, a studied carelessness where extreme effort is masked to appear like natural grace, is the master key to understanding the true elite. The genius must look accidental. The multi-million-dollar deal must be closed with a shrug. To appear to care too much about the outcome, to betray visible anxiety or excessive preparation, is to signal that the outcome is precarious, and therefore your position is vulnerable. The status signal works by controlling vulnerability. The individual who feels compelled to loudly announce their accomplishments, who meticulously curates their public image to present an unbroken facade of success, is terrified of the gap between presentation and reality. They are constantly overcompensating, essentially wearing a sign that reads, "My success requires your immediate validation." The truly powerful understand that minor, controlled vulnerabilities can actually increase status, paradoxically creating an aura of untouchable security. They are so established, so secure in their own domain, that they can admit to a trivial mistake or a small imperfection, knowing that the admission only serves to highlight the magnitude of the foundation beneath them. They are signaling that the stakes for them are so low that they can afford to be human. This leads us to the critical distinction between wealth and status. Wealth is a transactional measure, a balance sheet. Status is a psychological measure, an inherent ranking in the dominance hierarchy. We confuse the two because money can buy the visible trappings of status, but it cannot purchase the underlying state of non-urgency. You can buy the yacht, but you cannot buy the quiet confidence of the captain who has navigated the storms for decades. The man who boasts about his purchase is signaling new money, trying to convert dollars into respect. The man who never mentions it, who treats the extraordinary as mundane, is signaling old power, the kind of power that is calcified and become innate. He operates on a different frequency, a low-volume hum that everyone instinctively recognizes as authority. This frequency is built on two primary factors: the insulation from transactional necessity and the mastery of boredom. The ability to endure long periods of inactivity, contemplation, or simply waiting, without needing external stimulation or validation, is the final, most chilling signal that you are fundamentally removed from the frantic, reactive mass of humanity. This suffering, this frantic need to convert external stimulus into internal self-worth, has a name: the contingent self. Most of us are not built on bedrock. We are floating on a raft of social permissions. Our identity is an amalgamation of borrowed opinions and successfully executed performances, meaning that our very existence is conditional upon external approval. When validation is the currency of your existence, you are perpetually in psychological debt. Every social interaction becomes an audit, every silence an accusation. The person who cannot tolerate boredom, who must constantly refresh their feeds, who must always be doing or seen doing, is desperately trying to outrun the moment where the silence forces them to confront the instability of their own foundation. True security is knowing that the performance can end and you still exist. The insecure person cannot risk the curtain closing because they fear that they will vanish along with the applause. They are addicted to the noise of the world because it drowns out the terrifying whisper of their own inadequacy. If this relentless pursuit of psychological truth, of peeling back the layers of societal self-deception, resonates with you, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Do not miss the next deep dive into the mechanics of the human condition. Social media is not merely a platform, it is a hyper-accelerant for this psychological debt cycle. It transformed the occasional, localized need for validation into a continuous, global demand. It gave the contingent self a 24/7 stage and an instant feedback loop, making the pursuit of status a quantifiable metric, the like count, the follower tally. We are now living under the tyranny of the highlight reel, perpetually comparing our unedited, raw internal existence to the meticulously cropped and filtered external performances of everyone else. This comparison is a poison because the gap is unbridgeable. No amount of success shown online can satisfy the internal void, because the void is defined by the absence of internal definition, not the scarcity of external praise. You are consuming manufactured evidence of others' perfect lives and failing to realize that they are consuming the exact same manufactured evidence of yours. It is a mass hallucination where everyone is simultaneously the producer and the victim of the lie. The agony is compounded because the speed of the digital world means that the facade is always one bad comment, one missed trend, one moment of silence away from total collapse. The contingent self must therefore constantly scramble to stay ahead of the collapse, resulting in that frantic energy that true authority instantly perceives as weakness. The irony is that the true masters of status do not engage in the production of content. They engage in the production of gravity. They are the fixed points around which others must orbit. Their silence is those louder than the contingent person's shout. This is where the mastery of boredom becomes the ultimate philosophical weapon. Boredom is merely the friction generated when the mind is denied external novelty. For the person whose identity is stable, boredom is fertile ground. It is the space for original thought, for planning, for the slow, grinding work of internal architecture. For the contingent person, boredom is an existential threat because it offers no external data points to confirm their reality. They must fill every second with noise, activity, or consumption to avoid falling into the void of the unvalidated self. They suffer not from a lack of things to do, but from a terminal lack of self-definition. They fear being still because stillness reveals the architecture of the cage they built for themselves. The final act of psychological liberation, therefore, is the voluntary withdrawal of attention from the dominance hierarchy altogether. It is the moment you realize the game is rigged, the stage is fake, and the applause is meaningless. Not because you failed to achieve it, but because you recognize that the true prize was never on display. When you cease to chase status, status begins to chase you. When you cease to convert your life into a marketable performance, your authenticity becomes irresistible. This is the difference between being a star, a distant object that burns itself out in a desperate attempt to be seen, and being a black hole, an object of immense density whose very presence warps the space-time around it, drawing everything into its inescapable orbit. The star seeks to shine. The black hole simply is. True power is gravitational, not illuminative. It does not require light or heat to announce its existence. It is felt in the undeniable pull of its mass. The core difference is leverage. The star, no matter how bright, requires an audience. And anything that requires an audience can be leveraged by that audience. Its light is a transaction. The audience provides attention, and the star provides the performance of meaning. The contingent person is constantly offering leverage against themselves. They post their breakfast, their opinions, their minor victories, hoping to accrue social debt, likes, validation, recognition, which they believe translates into currency. But it is not currency. It is indebtedness. They become defined by their input stream, endlessly tweaking the software of the self to match the latest update in social expectation. The gravitational person, however, understands the first law of psychological warfare. Never offer a clear sightline to your internal operating system. You cannot leverage a force you cannot define. The moment you define your truth solely through external metrics, the number of followers, the size of your house, the complexity of your routine, you have given the market the keys to your emotional regulation. This radical self-possession, this refusal to define yourself by what others can see or approve of, is the primary engine of gravitational density. It is an act of intellectual secession from the status economy. If this sounds like the kind of disruptive, uncomfortable truth that most media actively avoids, it is because it exposes the mechanism of their control. If you value this kind of unfiltered analysis, the kind that prioritizes insight over comfort, you need to signal that support right now. Take 30 seconds, hit the subscribe button, and ensure you do not miss the ongoing demolition of modern psychological myths. The refusal to be defined is not passive resistance. It is an aggressive act of psychological boundary setting.
Consider the brutally honest, real-world example of the artist Banksy. Here is a figure who achieved maximum status by aggressively rejecting the very tools of modern status: visibility, accessibility, and market participation. He is not famous despite his anonymity. He is famous because of it. His gravitational force is inversely proportional to his illuminative presence. While every other artist, CEO, and influencer fights desperately for the right to be seen, to be heard, and to monetize their personal narrative, Banksy maintains an absolute, inviolable silence about his identity. This silence is not a void, it is a vacuum. The culture pours its own projections, fantasies, and interpretations into that vacuum, making him the ultimate Rorschach test for modern cynicism and consumerism. When he shredded his own artwork immediately after it sold for $1 million at auction, that act was not merely vandalism, it was the ultimate, undisputed declaration of non-contingency. It was the statement, "You may price this object, but you cannot define me." He sacrificed immediate monetary gain, the supposed definition of success in the art world, to purchase something infinitely more valuable, the undeniable gravitational weight of philosophical freedom. He proved that the person who can afford to destroy what the world values is fundamentally more powerful than the person who merely possesses it. The contingent person clutches their tokens. The gravitational person burns them for warmth, demonstrating their indifference to the rules of the game. This is the psychological move that must be internalized, realizing that the pursuit of external status is a spiritual tax paid for the privilege of existing in the eyes of others. It forces you into a permanent state of reactionary living, where your internal state is constantly dictated by the external feedback loop. The gravitational person eliminates the loop entirely. They do not seek to be known. They seek to know themselves with such unforgiving clarity that their internal world becomes the only stable reference point. This is the mastery of self-validation, the recognition that attention is a perishable resource, but genuine self-knowledge is an appreciating asset. This asset cannot be stolen, leveraged, or devalued by changing market sentiment. It is the only true form of impenetrable wealth. To gain this, you must first refuse the bait. The bait is always the same, the offer of immediate, easy recognition in exchange for the long, painful work of genuine becoming. The irony is bitter. The moment you stop performing, the world begins to watch you more closely, fascinated by the anomaly of someone who seems to need nothing from them. The deepest trap of the status game is that it convinces you that self-worth is a competition you must win, when in reality, self-worth is a foundational truth you must uncover. It is not an award given by the crowd. It is the scaffolding of your soul. We are trained from childhood to externalize validation, to achieve the grade, win the trophy, secure the approval of the parent or the peer group, until the interior life is hollowed out, existing only as an echo chamber for external judgments. The person who achieves gravitational status has undergone a brutal reinternalization process. They have done the slow, invisible work of constructing a self so robust that it does not require confirmation. They have built an identity like a vault, heavy, secure, and designed specifically to keep the outside world out. This internal architecture is what lends them their aura of effortless authority, because their actions are not dictated by the fear of disapproval, but by an unwavering alignment with their own codified, private truth. They are terrifyingly predictable to themselves and utterly unpredictable to the masses.
The most insidious lie whispered by the status quo is that visibility equals value, that the architecture of presence must be maximized at all costs. Society demands that you perform the exhausting, low-yield labor of constantly projecting your worth into the digital void, ensuring your brand is always on, always responsive, always available. This is the tyranny of the feed, a perpetual motion machine fueled by anxiety and the belief that if you are not seen, you will cease to exist. But the gravitational person recognizes this constant broadcasting as a profound weakness. It is the tactical equivalent of leaving your internal defenses perpetually open. True authority operates on the principle of strategic scarcity. If you are everywhere, you are nowhere. If your opinion is cheap and constantly offered, its weight approaches zero. The relentless need to be known, to be shared, to be liked, is simply the outward manifestation of an inward void that can never be filled by external metrics. It is the desperate scrambling of a person whose self-definition is outsourced. The gravitational masters operate in reverse. They understand that mystery is the necessary precondition for enduring fascination. They cultivate silence and focus their immense energy into the singular, difficult work that only they can do, making themselves selectively unavailable. Their actions are defined not by what they allow the world to see, but by what they ruthlessly refuse to share. This refusal to participate in the general entropy of availability is their defining signature. While the masses are trapped in the frantic dance of maximizing reach, the gravitational person is maximizing depth. They are building a subterranean reservoir of knowledge and capacity that the visible world only encounters when they choose to release a powerful current. They are not chasing the trend or seeking the viral moment. They are creating the structure of consequence itself. This kind of ruthless analytical separation from the noise, this insistence on building in the dark, is rare. If you find value in these relentless dissections of the modern psyche and want to ensure this deep, challenging analysis keeps finding its way to you, take a moment now to subscribe. It is the only way to support the kind of content that refuses to compromise its depth for the sake of mass appeal. The person defined by gravity has transcended the need for applause. They crave only competence. They seek perfection in the execution of their craft, not for the resultant accolades, but because any deviation from their private standard of excellence constitutes an unacceptable moral failure against the self. This is why their authority feels so effortless. It is not a performance designed to convince you. It is merely the observable byproduct of their internal commitment. They are not trying to be the center of attention. They have simply made themselves so structurally integral to reality, whether through expertise, insight, or sheer uncompromising vision, that attention orbits them naturally, like iron filings around a magnet. When you encounter such a person, you immediately sense that their opinion of themselves is already settled, and it is vastly more severe and definitive than any verdict the external world could ever render. They are playing a different game entirely, a game without spectators, where the only score that matters is the integrity maintained in the execution of their own internal blueprint.
The tragedy of the striving, externally validated masses is that they spend their lives chasing shadows cast by others, never realizing that the highest form of status is simply the quiet, unshakable confidence of having become the only honest judge of your own existence. The person chasing validation has committed the fundamental psychological error. They have made their peace contingent upon the perception of a capricious and fundamentally shallow audience. They have outsourced the most vital organ of the self, the judgment of worth, to a collective of strangers who are too distracted, too busy performing their own validation rituals to ever offer an honest appraisal. This is why their suffering is an inescapable feedback loop. They spend their entire lives administering a public relations campaign for a self they do not actually know, and every external victory only tightens the chains of future expectation. They are paralyzed not by failure, but by the fear of being exposed as merely average, because average means the borrowed status collapses, and they are left with the terrifying silence of their own unexamined existence. The internally validated person, the person of gravity, seeks solitude because that is where competence is forged. The externally validated person fears solitude because it is where the illusion of their importance finally dissolves. They confuse the temporary euphoric hit of affirmation for sustained identity, never realizing that the social mirror is deliberately warped, designed not to reflect truth, but to sell compliance. If you recognize the profound toxicity of this chase, if you feel the immense weight of the cultural pressure to prioritize visibility over vision, and if you value the relentless dissection of these psychological systems that seek to control and manipulate, then I ask you to consider subscribing now. It is the clearest signal that this level of uncompromising depth, which offers no easy answers and seeks only clarity, is worth the effort required to produce it. The great deception we are sold from childhood is that the universe keeps score of our efforts, that consistency and hard work are met with external recognition. But the universe is cold and indifferent to effort. It only measures structural integrity and consequence. The externally driven masses are perpetually disappointed because they confuse the transactional nature of human interaction, where approval is merely currency for desired behavior, with genuine, unconditional recognition. They become experts in navigating the petty hierarchies of their chosen field, mastering the jargon and the political maneuvers, yet they remain fundamentally hollow because their skills are optimized for impression, not impact. They can mimic the shape of authority, but they cannot withstand the pressure of reality when the lights go out. The person of gravity has already internalized this indifference. Their work is built to survive the scrutiny of time and the erosion of trends, precisely because it was never built for the ephemeral gaze of the crowd. They understand that the only audience that matters is the one that exists within the span of their own life, witnessing the consistency of their choices. Freedom, in this context, is simply the permanent cancellation of all external debts of recognition. It is the psychological state attained when you realize that no one else's opinion has the necessary jurisdiction to affect your internal value. To live outside that jurisdiction, to become your own final court of appeal, is the ultimate and most dangerous act of psychological rebellion. The tragedy, then, is not that most people fail to achieve greatness, but that they fail to achieve the quiet, radical independence require to even define what greatness means for themselves.
They suffer because they refuse to claim the crown of their own judgment, preferring instead to serve as anxious, perpetually probationary subjects in the kingdom of another man's standard. This servitude is not mandated by the world. It is chosen in the silent, debilitating fear of self-confrontation. This servitude is not mandated by the world. It is chosen in the silent, debilitating fear of self-confrontation. The final verdict on your life will not be delivered by a panel of peers, nor by the historical consensus, nor by the fickle metrics of social recognition. The ultimate judge is the self that witnesses every solitary choice, the self that cannot be lied to, the self that knows precisely the delta between what was performed and what was truly attempted. The tragedy, ultimately, is a failure of nerve, a refusal to accept the terrifying responsibility of ultimate self-authorship. This is why the person of gravity is often quiet. They are not waiting for approval. They are listening for structural flaws in their own character, constantly taking inventory of the integrity of their foundation. The external world, with its noise and its fleeting crowns, becomes nothing more than a secondary effect, a mere echo chamber reflecting the quality of the internal structure that was painstakingly built without fanfare. Your life is not a performance for the living. It is a design project intended to withstand the pressure of your own existence. To seek freedom is not to find a comfortable space where you are finally accepted, but to construct an inner fortress so complete that external rejection becomes irrelevant static. The only true measure of your worth, therefore, is the ruthless, private accounting of whether you lived up to the standard you set for yourself when no one else was watching. This is the heavy, lonely crown of authenticity. If you recognize the cost of trading attention for authenticity, and if you are committed to the difficult work of structural self-construction, then ensure you are part of this discussion. Hit that subscribe button now and join the community that values intellectual integrity over cheap performance. The life that matters is the life that refuses to be governed by provisional approval, the life that burns its own fuel. And the profound, dark truth is this: you will never be free until you accept that you are the only authority required for your own existence. The only authority required for your own existence. This leads to the final, necessary verdict. The life well lived is not a life praised by others, but a life uncompromised by the need for that praise. The entire search for external justification is the fundamental philosophical error of our age. We waste decades trying to fill a hole in our psyche with applause, forgetting that the only thing that can fill the void is structural, relentless integrity. The profound realization, the ultimate conclusion we must draw, is that meaning is not found, it is manufactured. It is a byproduct of high-quality action in the absence of witnesses. The freedom you crave is not granted. It is the natural state of a mind that has systematically dismantled every external dependency. This is why the highest form of courage is simply existing without apology or explanation, understanding that the only standard you must meet is the one you set in the terrifying quiet of your own mind. It is a lonely sovereignty, yes, but it is the only one that cannot be taken from you. Do not mistake the noise of the crowd for the voice of significance. The former fades, the latter endures,
only if you fortify it daily. If this radical, uncomfortable view of self-authorship resonates with the deep core of your aspiration, and if you are ready to stop consuming cheap content and start investing in structural thought, then join the community of thinkers who recognize that the greatest burden and the greatest liberation is the absolute necessity of being your own ultimate judge. Hit that subscribe button and let us continue this terrifying, necessary excavation of the self. This conversation is only just beginning. The final verdict, then, is this: the life well lived is not measured by its monuments, but by its immunity to compromise. It is not the life that receives the most attention, but the life that pays the most meticulous attention to its own principles. We must permanently abandon the delusion that salvation comes from popularity. The only real measure of success is the size of the gap between the person you pretend to be for others and the terrifyingly honest sovereign you know yourself to be in private. When that gap approaches zero, you have achieved integrity, and you have, by necessity, achieved peace. You will never be able to control what others think of you. Their minds are their prisons. But you can achieve total, tyrannical control over what you think of yourself. This shift from external performance management to internal structural resilience is not just advice. It is the ultimate psychological and philosophical survival mechanism. Understand this: choosing integrity is choosing the more difficult path, the path of permanent friction against a society built on softness and illusion. This path demands constant, silent sacrifice, and the world will rarely applaud you for your consistency, only for your volatility. But when the light finally begins to fade, you will not mourn the titles you failed to acquire. You will mourn the truth you failed to embody. The greatest tragedy is not failing to be great, but failing to be real. Your final reward will not be the echo of others' voices, but the quiet, unshakable recognition that you earned your own respect every single day. The life that matters is the one you would choose again, even if no one else was watching. That is the definitive, brutal answer. If you believe that depth is a moral imperative, and that the modern world has sacrificed true meaning for shallow comfort, then stand with us. This is not just a channel, it is a declaration of independence for the mind. If you are ready to trade cheap dopamine for structural wisdom, then join the community dedicated to this relentless pursuit of truth. Hit subscribe now, and let us continue building the only life worth living, the one built entirely upon its own terms. The only thing worse than being judged by the world is being acquitted by the world, yet found guilty by yourself. The verdict is definitive. The ultimate freedom is not the absence of external chains, but the voluntary choice to wear the heavy chains of your own uncompromising standards. The most powerful currency you possess is your integrity, and the moment you spend it for cheap, fleeting approval, you are intellectually bankrupt. Do not seek the applause of the temporary crowd. Seek the quiet, enduring nod of the sovereign self. My deepest belief is that we exist in an era profoundly allergic to genuine, demanding depth, where comfort is prized above truth. If you are not allergic, if you crave the painful clarity of reality over the comfortable fog of pretense, then this is where you belong. We are not here to chase trends. We are here to forge principles. Join the community dedicated to this radical, difficult clarity. Hit subscribe now and let us continue this necessary work. The revolution of the self begins with a single, honest choice